Smith. The question is that this bill be now read a second time, and I call the honourable member for Grey.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, I rise to speak on the Road Safety Remuneration Repeal Bill, of course, and the associated bill to defer its implementation as a fallback position. But I'm listening to the remarks from the member from Kingsford Smith, and I'm given to reflect that most of his speech was actually spent about talking about things which have very little to do with the current ruling from the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal, which affects owner drivers. But Mr Deputy Speaker, you've got to hand it to the unions and the ALP. They have this uncanny ability to make a cup of poison sound like it's really good for you, that it's as good as a serve of roast duck, for instance. They can dress up almost anything to make it sound as if this is a good outcome, and the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal is certainly one of those. It's a Labor union fit-up that is totally committed to unionising the full industry so they can control it from top to bottom. Now, I must turn to the remarks by the Shadow Employment and Workplace Relations Shadow Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations earlier at the opening of this debate, and an absolutely disgraceful linkage of a tragic accident that happened with my electorate yesterday near Crystal Brook on Highway 1, where he went through the details of those fatalities. He went through the age of the driver and the kinds of things you find in the newspaper with absolutely no background understanding of the accident at all. And then after making that very strong link between the RSRT, the current rulings and the accident, then said, of course, you shouldn't jump to any conclusions, that in fact it was the truck driver's fault. Well, that is a disgraceful linkage. It's something that a Member of Parliament should not be drawn into. If they don't know anything about a particular incident, they best keep their head down. My informers tell me that it is highly unlikely that the truck driver was at fault in this case, but it doesn't make it any less a great tragedy, and I think it would have been better if we'd left that debate alone. But the heart of this ruling, Mr Deputy Speaker, the RSRT singles out owner-operator truckies as being more dangerous than those they may employ to put in their truck cabs. And the premise is that they will charge more. They must charge more if they or their family are sitting in the operator's seat. If the owner-operator is sitting on top of his $450,000 investment, the very suggestion then that he or she would be less careful with that investment than an employee, I think just beggars belief. I've been speaking to numerous truck families since this ruling became to bear down us in the last few weeks. I have a bit of a list here. Certainly Joy and Colin Plain from Price on York Peninsula. Joy has been a fearless campaigner. She's been tracking all over Adelaide. She's contacted all the crossbenchers, and she was here yesterday for the rally in Canberra. 33 years in transport with one truck, and their son now operating as an owner-driver. This ruling by the RSRT is destined to drive them out of business. Don Davey is another truck operator in the Ardrossan area on York Peninsula. Scott and Rodney Quinn from Cleve operate a pretty big business. I think they run about 30 trucks, but they employ 30 subbies as well, and those subbies are mainly owner-operator. Rodney rang me up and he said, look, when the deferment came through a week ago, he said, you've just saved me the job. The court has saved me the job of picking up the phone on Monday and telling 7 owner-operators their services are no longer required. This is serious stuff. David Smith from Smith Haulage in Tumby Bay, Letitia and Michael Burke from Port Pirie, Belinda Ware from DJ and JM Ware on York Peninsula, Rodmore Transport in Peterborough, Natasha and Craig Landorf from Booberawi, and I sat down with some local truckies from my hometown, David and Barb Phillips and Don and Annie Binky. And they are all just bewildered that the government or anybody of the government could do this to them. They can't understand. Why would someone do it? why would they make the supposition that A, they are more dangerous drivers, and B, they'll have to charge more for their services than if they put an employee in the seat? Well, of course, the why is pretty simple, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I explained it to them. The why is because the owner-operators are, of course, a disparate lot. They're an independent lot, and they're virtually impossible to unionise. The unions are very comfortable with the big companies. The big companies allow them access to their workforce so they can sign them onto the union. I don't know, but I would be surprised, in fact, that the big companies don't supply some funding to the unions that help them in this task, but I don't know that for sure. The trucking companies, of course, are willing to deduct membership fees. For the union, more members, more money to pour back to the ALP campaigns, more numbers on the conference floors, and more ability to influence those selections on those people that may be elected to parliaments around Australia. No wonder the TWU hate owner-operators. And Mr Deputy Speaker, Australia is a free country, and surely a legislated price on product and service, a legislated minimum price on product and service, is a restraint of trade. Certainly it's anti-competitive. Imagine if we put a minimum price on shampoo, not something I use all that much of, I must admit, but if we put a minimum price on shampoo or pies or plumbing services or anything else you like to care to place your mind to. I mean, firstly, this puts a great restraint in the economy. It's almost guaranteed to take away a competitive edge, and that spirit of entrepreneurialism that we should foster in Australia, where people stick their neck out and have a go. If you legislate this flat line across the economy, it doesn't matter what you do it with, you upset that balance. So we absolutely should allow people who run their own businesses to set the fees for their own services. It is the way our economy should operate. PricewaterhouseCoopers has estimated or reported that this ruling by the RSRT is likely to cost $2.3 billion, $2,300 million over the next 15 years to the economy, and threatens the jobs of 3,500 workers. I mean, that should be enough to make anyone draw a breath, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I can say in that part of the world that I come from, which is the regions of South Australia, the bulk of the trucking task, apart from the interstate movements which run right through the electorate, of course, but the bulk of the trucking movements are carried by owner-operators. There are links that go back into the grain industry, and some might argue grain industry is short haul. It's not necessarily. In fact, my farm, situated 240 kilometres from the port, is a round trip a long haul, is a second trip during the day a long haul. Is a primary product like wheat or milk en route to supermarket, because it's en route to the manufacturer along the way. There are so many unanswered questions for those people trying to run trucking business at the moment. A gentleman, one of the truckies I was talking to, had run some sums over that he thought he was doing under the guidance, the right thing. Had run some sums on his business, where he concluded that his freight rate for trucking grain was going to have to rise by 25%, which immediately puts him out of business. An extra few dollars to the grower just means, well, we don't utilise that truckie. He's finished. I've received reports from the trucking retail industry that their order books have just dried up, and that some operators have cancelled orders that they were expecting to take delivery of new trucks, and the uncertainty has just meant that they said, no, put that on hold. We're not having it at the moment till this is cleared up, and I know that I've got a business into the future. That is the kind of signals that tell us there is something terribly wrong with this ruling by the RSRT, and by extension probably with RSRT itself. It is dominated by people that have past union links, and in fact the head of it, it comes out of the ATCU. And it's also a very interesting read to have a look at their salary packages too, Mr Deputy Speaker. There's somebody in the transport industry that's doing all right, and certainly those Fair Work Commissioners are amongst those. Salaries in excess of $400,000 a year. A lot of my truckies would dearly love to get their hands on that kind of money, let me tell you. And it's an ingenious method they've used too, Mr Deputy Speaker, to pass the penalty on to the truckies. The fines aren't actually aimed at the truckies, they're aimed at the people who utilise the truckies. So while the truckie might think, well, I might take a risk, or I might do this, or I might do that, in fact, there's very little they can do, because it is his consumer, it is his customer who says to them, well, I can't afford to take a risk with you, so you're cancelled. Consider your services terminated. And that's exactly what's been happening. It's exactly what's been happening. Now, I've seen some truckies pretty upset over the time. I talk to them pretty regular. A number of operators that I go to for sage advice on the transport industry, particularly in South Australia. I've never seen them so crook on anything. They are beside themselves. I think back over a number of other issues they've come to me with, and they've been pretty grumpy, but I've never seen them like this. They just say, this will destroy the industry. It will destroy the industry. And I think we saw a bit of that passion out on the lawns in front of Parliament House this morning, where the truckies have made that effort to come to Canberra. And as I pointed out, there's one woman who actually came to the rally yesterday and made what's a very long trip from York Peninsula to Canberra, just because they know this is so important to their industry. And it's so important to my constituency, because anything that significantly drives up the freight rates in regional South Australia significantly drives up the cost of living in South Australia. We are absolutely freight dependent. We pay freight on objects, we pay freight on the things that we produce and sell, and we pay freight on all of our inputs. We are absolutely dependent on them. And I can tell you, as a past grain grower, the incredible cost, the ever-growing cost of freight into that final wheat check. It's hard to contemplate that it costs more to get my freight, my wheat down the road 200 kilometres than it costs to take it to the other side of the world once you've got it on a boat. Now, I'm not saying in any way that we're being ripped off in the system. I don't think we are. They all have expenses to meet. But the very idea that then we would put a minimum price into the system that would raise that cost for everybody is, well, it's worse than an insult. It's an absolute threat to all of our businesses. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, with those remarks I'll round up. Certainly I am very pleased to hear that we sound like we have the support to get this through the Senate. It is worthwhile for those that supported it in the first place who have now changed their mind to contemplate how that came about, and maybe they might take more care over legislation that comes towards them in the future. Thank you very much.
I thank the honourable member for Grey.